Hey guys, welcome to one of the fastest growing sports YouTube channels out there, Gold and Blue Dude. And it is time for my final preseason top 25 poll. Let's go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Gold and Blue Dude. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day. That's what I do. And while you're here, don't forget to go check out tristatewoodsketch.com. All you have to do is send the picture that you want transferred onto wood, and he'll get it done. And if you mention Gold and Blue Dude, you'll get 20% off. Also, real soon, we're going to start our score prediction contest. I want to pick out one game every week, and I'm going to have my subscribers guess the score. And whoever gets the closest to the score is going to grab $50. And if there's a tie, all you have to do is jump over to my Patreon page, join my Patreon page. Doesn't have to be the highest level. It can be the $5 level. And boom, you're qualified. Once you're a Patreon member, every week you'll send your score prediction to my email. And I'm setting the prize at $50. And you're allowed to win more than once. So you could win a lot of money on my score prediction contest. Hey guys, it's finally time for my final Gold and Blue Dude preseason top 25. First, I have 5 honorable mentions. The first one, Michigan. I think Michigan can go 8-4. They do have a tricky schedule, but I do think they will improve and get to a decent bowl this year. Next, honorable mention. This one might surprise you. Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to go 8-4, 7-5, somewhere in that range. They have a brutal schedule. It's not that I think that Notre Dame's going to be bad. I think they'll have a good team, but their schedule is ridiculous. Third honorable mention, Oregon. I think Oregon goes 8-4. They have a tricky schedule as well, and I don't think they're quite as good as people are hyping them up to be. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think Oregon is a top 25 team this year. Fourth honorable mention, my team, West Virginia. I think we're close, but we're not quite there yet. I think West Virginia will go either 9-3 or 8-4, but still take another step forward under Neil Brown. Then my final honorable mention, LSU. I think LSU goes 9-3, so much better than last year, but right on the fringe of my top 25 poll. Now let's get into it. Number 25, Boise State. A lot of people have forgotten about Boise State, but Boise State has been the most consistent, winningest group of 5 team there is. This year, I think Boise State will either go 11-1 or 10-2. Their 2 toughest games at UCF, which I do think they will lose that game, and then a home game against Oklahoma State. I do think they'll beat the Cowboys, but if they lose, it's still going to be a 10-win season. Number 24, coming from a West Virginia fan, Pitt. Yeah, I think Pitt's going to be a pretty good team this year. I think their overall record is going to end up being 9-3. All their toughest games are at home. A home game against Clemson, a home game against Miami, a home game against North Carolina. If they win just one, which they are capable of, Pitt could have a 10-win season. But right now, I'm sticking with 9-3. Number 23, Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss going 10-2 or 9-3 as well. They've got some tough games, though. At Alabama, which I do think is a loss, a home game against LSU, home game against Liberty, and a home game against Texas A&M. So 3 out of their 4 toughest games are at home. So I definitely think it is possible for Ole Miss to have a 10-win season. Number 22, TCU, flying under the radar. I think TCU is capable of a 10-win season as well. Toughest games at Oklahoma, which I do think they lose. Then the home game against West Virginia, at Oklahoma State, and then at Iowa State. So I definitely have them losing at Oklahoma and at Iowa State. If they can win those other 2 home games, which I think they will, boom, 10-win season for TCU. Big bounce back here. Number 21, UCF. I think UCF also has a 10-win season. I have them going 10-2. Toughest games, a home game against Boise State. I do think they win that though. At Cincinnati, a tricky game at Louisville, even though I don't think Louisville is going to be all that great. And then a home game against Memphis. Number 20, Washington, the Huskies. I have them going 10-2 as well. Here's their tricky games. At Michigan at the beginning of the year. And the home game against Oregon. I think they win that game. Then a tough home game against Arizona State. Number 19, Louisiana. I think Louisiana goes 11-1. 2 tricky games. At Texas, at Liberty. I think they split those games. I think it's the at Texas that they win, and then the at Liberty later in the season that they lose. Number 18, Utah. Nobody's talking about this team, but I do think Utah's going to have a bounce back year. I think they're going to go 10-2. Here's their tough games. At BYU. I think they win that. BYU's taking a big step back, but it is a rivalry game. And at USC, home game against Arizona State, and then the home game against Oregon. So yeah, Utah is definitely capable of having a 10-win season this year. Number 17, Iowa. I also have them going 10-2. Here's their tough games. A home game against Indiana to start the season. I think they win that. Tough road trip to Iowa State, then a home game against Penn State, State, and then a tough road trip to Wisconsin. I think they win the home games and lose the road games. Number 16, Arizona State. Yes, I know there's a scandal going on and allegations, but they still have a lot of talent over there. I think they have a 10-win season. They have 3 tough games: at Utah, home against USC, at Washington. I think they drop both of those road trips, but I think they can upset USC at home. Number 15, Coastal Carolina. I think Coastal Carolina could go undefeated this year. Their 2 toughest games at Appalachian State, at Georgia Southern, and Coastal Carolina is definitely better than those 2 teams. Number 14, Miami, the Hurricanes. I expect Miami to have a 10-win season, but not really compete for the ACC championship. I don't think they're going to get past North Carolina, and definitely not past Clemson. Tough games: Alabama in Atlanta. I have Miami losing that game, but I think it's going to be closer than people think. Then at North Carolina, and a tricky road trip to Pitt. That's going to be tough. Number 13, I have Texas A&M. I have them grabbing 2 losses, but still a 10-win season. Here's their tricky games: a home game against Alabama, which I actually think Texas A&M will win, at Missouri, and I think Missouri's going to be a much better team this year. That's going to be a tough road game, at Ole Miss, and at LSU. Yes, I think Texas A&M will lose 2 of those road trips. Number 12, going to surprise you, Kentucky. I have Kentucky having a big bounce back year, 10-win season, and only 2 really tough games. The home game against LSU, very winnable, and at Georgia. I do think they lose at Georgia for sure. Number 11, talk about another bounce back team, Penn State. Also another 10-win season, 4 tough games: at Wisconsin, home against Indiana, at Iowa, and at Ohio State. I think they can upset somebody on 1 of those road trips, and that's all it's going to take for them to have a 10-win season. Now we're getting into the top 10. Number 10, USC, 10-win season. I think they'll win the Pac-12. 3 tough games though: home against Utah, at Notre Dame, and at Arizona State. And who knows, they could trip up somewhere else because they have been known to be inconsistent. Number 9, people have this team a lot higher, but I have Ohio State at number 9. I think having a super green quarterback as a starter is going to hurt Ohio State. Here's their tricky games: the home game against Oregon, at Indiana, home against Penn State, and at Michigan. Yeah, I think they lose 2 of those 4 games. Number 8, Iowa State. They're going to have a great season, maybe the best in team history, but it just so happens they're going up against a historically great Oklahoma team this year, which is going to spoil that season. I have Iowa State going 11-1. Here's their tough games: home game against Iowa, at West Virginia. Iowa State is the better team, but that's a tough road test, at Oklahoma, and the home game against TCU. Number 7, North Carolina. Kind of in the same scenario as Iowa State. I think they're going to have one of their historically great seasons, but it'll be spoiled by Clemson. Here's their tough games: at Virginia Tech. That's a tough way to open the year, on the road at Virginia Tech. The home game against Miami, at Notre Dame, at Pitt, at NC State. So they do have a treacherous road schedule, but I think North Carolina is good enough to navigate through that. Number 6, Alabama. Yeah, I think Alabama takes a step back. Now for the season, I have them going 11-1. I think they lose to Texas A&M. I think they get to the SEC championship and lose to Georgia. Here's their tough games: Miami in Atlanta. I think Alabama wins that. It's going to be close. A home game against Ole Miss, at Texas A&M. That's where I think Alabama grabs their first loss. And then this year, a home game to LSU. Number 5, Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's going to go undefeated. They have a lot of talent on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, and they have a great coach in Luke Fickell. But they do have some tricky games: at Indiana, at Notre Dame, and then home against UCF. But I do think that they are capable of going on the road and beating Indiana and Notre Dame. I think Cincinnati's going to go undefeated and will have a good argument to make the playoffs. But will they trip up in the AAC championship game? Will the pressure be too much? Number 4, this is going to raise your eyebrows: Wisconsin. Yeah, I think Wisconsin's going to be a great team. I think they're going to go 11-1, get to the Big Ten championship, and beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Really, they just have 2 tough games during the regular season: the home game against Penn State, and then Notre Dame in a neutral site in Chicago. And that's why I have Wisconsin going 11-1, get to the Big Ten championship, beating Ohio State, getting to the playoffs possibly. Number 3, Georgia. I think Georgia goes 11. To me, they just have 2 tough games this year. I'm being serious. Clemson game in Charlotte, which I do have Georgia losing, and a home game against Kentucky. Yeah, that's right. I'm not counting that game against Florida as a tough game. I think Florida's going to slide all the way down to 4th place in the SEC East. So after that close loss to Clemson in Charlotte, they're going to run the table and get to the playoffs. Number 2 is where I have Clemson. I think Clemson goes undefeated. They do have 3 tricky games though. First up, Georgia in Charlotte, but I do have Clemson winning in a close game. Then at NC State, and then at Pitt. Clemson is clearly the better team over NC State and Pitt, but they are on the road. Then my number 1 team, Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma goes 12-0. They have to go on the road to Kansas State, and Kansas State has had their number, but I think Oklahoma is by far the superior team this year. Kansas State lost a lot on offense, and they get Texas and Dallas, but I think Texas is not going to be any good this year. And then they get Iowa State at home. Biggest question is, can can they beat Iowa State twice? Because they're going to have to beat them in Norman, which I think they will, and then they'll have to beat them in the Big 12 championship game. And I think they're going to do that as well. Go undefeated, get into the playoffs. Y'all let me know what you think of my final preseason top 25. I'm sure you disagree on a lot of things, so I can't wait to hear these comments. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.